we are back every Wednesday from 11 to 11:50, Warp and Woof Radio at radionext.tv at the Cool Groove site. And we're glad to be back here with you on this particular Wednesday to introduce you to some new folk around Indianapolis who are doing good based on Titus 3, 1, 8, and 14. Do good, do good, do good. That's the focal point of our show, Christians who are doing good in and around Indianapolis. But before we do that, before we get into the show, just a comment about the Comenius Institute that supports this particular show. At Comenius, we cross three bridges. The first is at the college, which is where I work down at IUPUI. I teach there with some really great colleagues, really grateful to be there on faculty, but also doing some work with students, helping Christian young people to think Christianly about the things that they're learning and the things that they're studying at university. The second bridge that we cross is into community, which is what we're doing right now. This particular radio show has been going on for over 4 years. We've had over 200 episodes, over 250 guests from around Indianapolis who are doing good, Christians who are doing good around Indianapolis. And that's our basic commitment to the community around Indianapolis, that we might be able to introduce folks, Christians who are doing just that. And then the third bridge is into culture. And what you'll see every Tuesday morning is something called Truth in Two. You can find this all over social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere. And what we do on our Truth in Two episodes, 2 minutes of Christian truth, is to emphasize how do we navigate the culture in which we live? How do we think differently than other people do? And then how does our belief system actually impact those things? We do this in lots of different ways, not only the Truth in Two episodes. You can go to our websites, warpandwoof.org, that's warpandwoof.org, or you can go to Comenius Institute, that's COMENIUS institute.org or .com, and you can find all kinds of video and essay and materials there that you might want to find. But today, it's a great privilege, great honor to introduce Indianapolis to really a burgeoning movement around Indianapolis, which is helping returning citizens, men coming out of prison, to find places not only of home, but of work and of sustenance. And this is for the whole person, including their spiritual lives. So we have here with us Martin and Kevin. We're really grateful for both of your presence here today. Thanks ever so much for being here.
Our pleasure.
So as we always do, we give everybody an opportunity to give a little bit of bio. So if you guys wouldn't mind doing that, go right ahead. Tell us about who you are and what you do.
Sure. I'll jump in there. I guess I would introduce myself as I'm a recovering architect. So I had practiced architecture here in Indianapolis for just about 20 years. And then I was hired by the Indiana Department of Corrections to start the first faith-based parole program. And in a nutshell, that boiled down to men who were coming out of prison who wanted faith to be a part of their parole experience. And so that's where Martin and I met. And so from there, parole in 2019, I left parole to join the staff at the church that I belong to, Brookside Community Church, and I was a director of reentry there, working with a faith-based or a special church service that is uniquely designed around returning citizens. And then from there, felt the call of God to get closer to men into the trenches, because that's where the real call of my life is. And that's when I joined Foresight Forgivers and stepped into the Nazareth Men House as Director of Operations and Ministry Programming. And so now I'm right there in the trenches, working alongside men who are coming out of jail, coming out of prison. So.
Just to everybody knows, Kevin is master of the whiteboard. So if you ever want to communicate with Kevin, make sure that you bring lots of whiteboard markers.
A little handicapped on radio.
Just a little bit. I'm going to have to put something up behind us over here. Yeah. Well, thanks ever so much, Kevin. We've been on the show together. Of course, you and I have over a decade-long friendship. I'm forever grateful for that. Martin, tell us about what brings you here and why you're committed to what you do.
Well, I am, along with my wife, involved in helping the least of these to find their way back from difficult circumstances and dark places. Spent a little time in those dark places myself, and recognize that there are men who, with the right kind of help, the right kind of cushion under them when they land back from incarceration, can make it. They can make it in the absolute sense of the word. And so my wife and I started Foresight Forgivers Foundation in 2017, and the Nashes Men House is our primary work growing out of that. A place where a broken guy can come, a safe place where he can sit still for a minute, get his bearings about him, and then get on with the business of living his life. And so we're grateful to God for what's happening with that.
This is, I think, important that we kind of just set a foundation for what we're discussing here. So if either or both of you would take a minute to just explain to everybody the concept of returning citizens, because, you know, quite frankly, I don't think that everybody understands the nomenclature all the time, and I don't want to rush over that. So why don't we just take a moment to explain that to everybody?
Go ahead.
So from my point of view, as a returning citizen, I prior to incarceration spent a little time in my life trying to help guys who were getting out of prison, and I never really could fully appreciate the difficulties involved and why it was that a guy could take advantage of the resources that were provided, but still found himself right back again and again. And then I found myself incarcerated. And when I got into that upside down world, I began to see and understand some things that I didn't understand before. Prison is a counterculture with its own belief systems, its own norms and mores. Yeah, the guy spoke English like me, but the words meant something different often. A guy returning home has all of the same needs that all the rest of us have, but it's how you serve. It's how you serve those needs, and how you help a guy to connect back. And it's difficult. It's a challenge that is for some insurmountable. And if you don't have someone to walk along with you,
yes,
and give you the space that you need to take those important first steps, then it gets to be almost impossible to work it out.
One of the things that strikes me about this is helping people perhaps to understand, how does a faith-based system help recidivism? So again, for everybody out there, recidivism means the concept of people returning to prison. Once they've been out of prison, they commit another crime and they return to prison. The whole point behind recidivism is that we're trying to reduce it. That is to not have people go back in prison again. So what is it about a faith-based system that stops the recidivism rate, or lowers it at least?
I personally would answer that when a guy comes out of prison, or when a man or a woman comes out of jail or prison, there are a handful of things that are absolutely mission critical. One of those is have to have a livable wage. So I have to be able to make a living that I can actually live on, not just get by. So a livable wage. I've got to have transportation. So in and of itself, that expands beyond public transportation. I've got to have safe housing. If I don't have a livable wage and safe housing, I'm destined to go right back to my comfortable pair of shoes that I just left however many years ago. And I'm going to handle my business however I know how to do that. The third, I would argue, is you've got to have a support system. Now, secularly, we would see that as our friends and our families, and that certainly applies. But I would argue that the network, that support system that is the church, the Big C church, really needs to be that network and that support system. And when we, as the church, when we are engaging this man or this woman in trying to help that person overcome the obstacles that are common to a person, but also unique to a returning citizen, someone who's coming out of jail or prison, then we are doing what Christ has called us to and serving the least of these. And so I think you got to have all three of those.
You got to have all of that system. Anything to add?
But, we speak of faith as if it's a side issue, when in reality it is fundamental to life itself. If I didn't believe that this building's roof were going to stay up there, I would be on my way out. We live by faith. Everything we do it on the basis of faith. Guys who get out of prison need to build their faith in God and in righteousness and in themselves and in their fellow man. There's just a real faith deficit. And so coming to a safe place, to me, is the first step. You've got to have a safe place you can come to, and then from in that safe environment, you can work on the other things that are essential in order to move forward.
So let's kind of break this down, and you've kind of laid out some of the most important aspects of the ministry that you're invested with. So let's talk about, you talked about the issue of lodging and home and how people need their own livable wage and so on. But then the aspect of the support system. You can go about telling us about this any way you want, but make sure at some juncture to tell some of those stories you were telling me the other day about the importance of how this has all come together so quickly, in terms of the house and so on.
Well, the Nashes Men House is the result of goodwill. The goodwill that the people of God have, who recognize that we've got to do more than just talk about helping a guy to recover, and recognizing how important shelter is in the whole scheme of things. So we purchased this house on faith. That's a longer story than what we'll tell now. But we purchased this house and then make the need known to men and women across the state. And it's an amazing thing how a group of individuals came to the Nazareth Man House one Friday, one Tuesday to be exact, looked around the place, talked with us about what we needed, what we wanted done, and then came back that Friday, 14 men, including little boys, and went to work, removing walls and removing old floors and kitchen cabinets and what have you, and rebuilding this house. At the end of it, we are 10 weeks later living in a well modern renovated building that is fit, I believe, for kings and queens.
I was there, I agree. I think so. Just for the sake of interest, make sure to tell everybody about who these 14 people were that came.
Okay, so there's a Mennonite brother who comes to the house first, a guy that we met through some people we know. He came all the way from Ohio, by the way, 6 hours away. He comes to the house and looks around and talks to me about the ministry, and then asks me what I need. I told him, I don't need anything. I have you. I need you. It's really something. On his way home, 6-hour trip back home, about 3 hours, he phones me and he says, Martin, I know a guy I'm going to call and see if I can get him interested. This guy that he knows is an Amish brother who is in northern Indiana, and he calls him, and then he calls me back an hour later and tells me to take pictures of the house, inside, outside, take the pictures, produce them, put dimensions on the pictures, and send them to this address, which I do. And for Amish gentlemen, he picks them up a Tuesday thereafter, and they come into our dining room and walk around this house. They listen to our little spiel, and then they leave and call us back after they have left the house and say, we'll be back Friday. things like that. And sure enough, they show up Friday with hammers and construction material and go to work on that house. And 10 weeks later, that house is as you saw it the other day.
It's absolutely gorgeous. Let me just say, the Amish do not mess around, okay? when they come to work, they come to work. And you were mentioning the little boys. They came to work too. I just chuckling about that.
Oh, it's really something. There was a chimney that had to be torn down. They took the chimney down.
Tell that story.
The chimney has not been operational for years and years, and so it's very firmly stopped up. And they're taking it down from the top down and throwing bricks down it in order to then filling the wheelbarrow up and taking the bricks out. And the bricks stop coming, and so they keep pushing and pushing, and finally it comes through. The bricks come through all of the soot. The whole room fills up with black soot, and there's this little kid. He's got his eyes closed, and the only thing that's white on his face are his eyelids, right? And I said, so now you know how it feels to be a black guy in America. What a moment.
That's a great story.
What a moment. Yeah.
This is fantastic stuff. We're going to be going to break in about 4 minutes. Kevin, I wanted to ask you about your role in all of this. How do you see yourself working in the process of the Nazareth Man House?
I literally just, follow the Spirit of God is the short answer. But I see it as a supporting role. I'll give you an example. I'll answer your earlier question because I think it demonstrates how I function now in the role. When you talked about tell some stories about what does it look like to have a support system. Well, Martin and I met because I was his parole agent. And so here this man is, he's an anomaly in the sense that he's not your average person who's coming out of prison on parole. Not only is he well educated, but he has an extremely diverse network of support system. He's married. Most guys are not, or separated. But my point being is I had to walk beside Martin in a very unique way. I could see what the Spirit of God was doing in his life. He told me all about the ministry, and I just had to come alongside them. My role as a parole agent at the time, yes, there's supervisory components that needed to be done. But Martin needed to travel, all right? He needed to go preach. He needed to go to book signings. He needed to go fundraising, all for these things that he just told you about the house being built. So if I did not operate in a supportive role, which I didn't have to do as his parole agent, it was, I see what God's doing, and I can't get in the way of what God's doing in another person's life. It's the exact same thing at the Nazareth Man House is watch for what God's doing, then align myself with God in that man, in that moment. Sometimes that's helping a man get a ride to work until he can resolve his transportation issue. Sometimes that's just a guy sitting down in my office to have a conversation and to share what's going on in his heart and his mind that he's a little worried about going to work today, returning to work. So ministering in the moment by moment is what we were talking about in our devotions this morning. Ministering in the moment and not letting that moment pass is a good part of it.
These are fantastic words from two fantastic men here on the south side of Indianapolis who are invested in the Nazareth Man House. We're really grateful for their presence here. Later on the podcast, you'll be able to pick us up on iTunes. Of course, you can share the video that those of you who are watching us on Facebook Live, you can do that anytime and share this great ministry. Tell your friends about this. Martin and Kevin are looking for partners just like everybody else, other nonprofits are around the city. You listen to Warp and Woof Radio, radionext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We're going to take a one-song break. When we come back, in our second segment, we'll continue the conversation about the Nazareth Man House. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio. So we're still Facebook Live. Just I tell everybody that just so you remember. Hi, everybody. So when we come back, I always ask everybody, just as we're kind of transitioning from one segment to the next, where would you like to go with the conversation? So you can let me know where you would like to go. We just make it go there. Yeah. Do you have any thought about any direction, things, stories you want to tell? Or?
Well, yeah. Wow. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think helping people grapple with the idea of what Nazareth Man House really looks like. So helping people to understand when Joe Q. Public thinks about transitionary housing, they think of some flea bag infested flop house that I go to dry out and get my act together. That's not what Nazareth Man House is. And I think talking about the embassy is a good thing, so that people understand, wow, okay, here's what this is on paper, and here's how we function as a ministry, walking beside that, because that's radically different than a transitionary house. Most people understand.
And I like that concept of the embassy metaphor that you bring up the other day and just mentioned again here today. So we can pick up on that and we'll just riff on it. Second segment. Okay. Thanks for hanging in there with us. Any interesting comments this morning, brother?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Got people lighting us up over there.
Lighting you up over there.
Yeah.
David Nimitz appreciates you raising awareness on this topic. And we've got Patricia Gilbert that is on here, which is a good friend of mine. Excellent, praying for the ministry. Very informative, says Joe Hunter. And I want to know just personally, let them know, because I had to witness somebody have the wherewithal to transform and change their life. And a lot of times I think people just need to understand that this isn't going to be easy, but you have to grit it up. Because it's no, like we were saying earlier, it's no better person to talk about redemption than somebody who's had to come back. And a lot of times we got people who haven't had to redeem themselves, not understanding what you deal with sometimes in the public square, you know, and overcoming that. You know, you have to say, okay, this is what's on me. And so every time you do it, you got to do it a little harder. You got to do it a little, more diligently. But nobody's there to tell that. People don't know that, because they're being judged while they're trying to make a comeback. That's tough. I watch young people when they go and try to invite people to church. That sounds good, but when they come to church and you condemning them, before you even show them some love, you're talking about what they're wearing and how their hair looks and pull your pants. Man, let them get some Jesus in them and then start constructing. It'll be a lot easier then.
Try to ignore the hat that they have on their head. Yeah, they really should take it off, but
but that's not as important as having somebody here and be around. I was having a conversation this morning. Reverend Harrison won't be in today, and people out there listening, they can hear me too. But I was talking about we want change in our children, but then as adults, I'm watching the way we're condemning and spitting at each other on this social media platform, and I'm thinking, kids aren't interested in what you're talking about. They're watching what you're doing. And if we act like that and then want them to act any different, man, we're so crazy. I said, man, come on. If you have a problem, give somebody a call and say, can we sit down and talk? Because airing it on social media just causes young people to think it's the way we handle conflict. They're not as smart to know how not to do violence or, taking it out physically or whatever. That's how they resolve their issue. They don't have enough intellect yet. So, I'm like, this ain't hard.
Good intro that might be helping people understand where the name came from.
Yeah.
Because that begins to set a tone for how we as a society tend to look at people with felony records.
We'll come back in after this commercial. Thanks for hanging in there with us, Facebook Live.
Facebook.
They're hanging on Cool Groove too. I'm watching
Oh,
them.
good.
The people are loving it. I'm
Good.
loving that.
And we are back, Warp and Woof Radio at RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. Our producer, Harold H.B. Bell, behind the scenes, taking good care of all the screens and all of the things that I have no clue about. Grateful for his ministry in all of the things that we do. Grateful, too, for...
I don't even.
He's telling us he doesn't know either. That's not really true. We also are grateful for Josh Collingwood and for all of the good work that he does to make sure all of the digitization takes place well. I know HP loves it when I say that word. All of the great digital work that he does behind the scenes. He makes our iTunes podcast. He takes care of our Truth and Two. He makes sure that our websites fly in the right direction. We're always grateful for Josh and for his work. Thankful, too, for our board of the Comenius Institute. Thankful ever so much for them and for their constant interaction in ways that folks don't always see. So grateful for folks like Janelle and HB and Stu Shade and all the folks there on the board. Grateful for all of them. But we're back with Kevin and Martin. We want to make sure that we, again, introduce you to them about the good work at the Nazareth Men House. Let's start our second segment with maybe an overview of why did you choose that name?
Nazareth Man.
Yeah.
The Nazareth Man. There is this incident in the life of our Lord when he is calling his disciples. And Philip is in an earlier group than Philip's brother Nathaniel, who encounters the Messiah. And he goes to get his brother to tell him, we have found the Messiah. And he wants to invite his brother to come and meet him. And his brother, who they were in a separate location from where Jesus was at the moment. His brother says when he finds out where Jesus is from, that little no-count village called Nazareth, can anything good come out of Nazareth? And of course, he encounters Jesus and he discovers what we have all discovered, those of us who have encountered him, how wonderful and amazing our Lord really is. So the Nazareth Man House exists because there are many men who, unbeknownst to themselves, are Nazareth men. There's a whole lot of good that can come out of dark, lonely, deserted, demonic places. And there's so many men who have given up. The people they know have given up on them. Society has labeled them in such a way that makes it difficult for them to find their way back from a dark place. And so the Nazareth Man House exists because we believe broken men are mendable. We believe that a man who gets a second chance, and not just any old second chance. And let me say this too: we live in a country that is full of goodness. There's a lot of goodness. There are a lot of people and a lot of organizations who extend themselves to help people. It's not that there's not help available. There's help available everywhere. And I don't want to suggest that we found all of the answers, because we haven't. But we have some insight that we didn't have before on how to help a guy, how to help a guy, the way to get the help to him. And the Nazareth Men House then is a safe place where a guy can get his footing under him to move forward.
One of the things that strikes me about social media and the interconnectivity that we have in our day is one of my former students from high school back in the 1990s. She and I were kind of behind the scenes on Facebook yesterday and today, talking about just life and the issues that men face, because she's in a group that actually ministers out of country in Thailand, and they're rescuing young women out of sex trafficking. And so the difficulty that she's seeing in men's lives, and the difference, of course. And so we were having this conversation behind the scenes, and I'm really anxious to kind of go back and amend and kind of further the conversation by saying, that line that was uttered, can anything good come out of Nazareth, is happening in Indianapolis. So that's really cool.
many men. One of our men this morning after devotional, doing devotional, he has been with us now for over a week. We tell our guys as they come in, when you walk off that sidewalk onto this property and come into this house, you are no longer in Indianapolis. When you step through those doors, you are in the kingdom of God. The Nazareth Man House is a spiritual embassy, and the rules of the kingdom apply here, and helping them to appreciate what that really means. And so we tell them about an embassy, maybe an American embassy in Russia, and how you can be in Moscow, but when you walk through those gates on that compound, you are in the United States of America. And the rules and the laws of our country govern within that compound. And so it is when you come into the Nazareth Man House. And things like love, that covers a multitude of sins, and mercy and grace, that favor that's extended to a person who doesn't deserve it. These things abound in the Nazareth Man House, and that is really all that most men need. And this one guy this morning said to me, he says, Pastor, I just keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. I keep waiting for something to give here. Is this really for real? What's happening here? And helping him to see that this is not going anywhere. This is who we are in Christ, and it makes a big difference.
Well, there's a learning curve. A lot of times, what I used to say in parole, and what I say now is, when a guy comes out of prison, he's got a comfortable pair of shoes that he knows really, really well, and so learning how to not put that comfortable pair of shoes back on means I have to learn how to walk in the Spirit in a new way. And that is unfamiliar. It's not something that we can control. That's where faith comes in. And so we have to resist the urge to go with what we know and break those bondages to, okay, I got to pay rent, so I'm going to handle my business the way, whatever it takes. Well, no, now I need to be trusting that, okay, how's God going to help me to do these things now? And learning to wear that new pair of shoes, what I like to say is the new normal. The new normal. What does my new normal look like as I'm walking with God versus just me, myself, and my partner's on the corner or whatever it was I was doing. So
this is an important idea too. If we're going to follow up on the embassy concern, obviously coming out of 2 Corinthians 5, where we emphasize the ambassadorship that each one of us has. So we literally are coming out of the embassy, but we are ambassadors out in that other country.
That's it. And so this brother this morning he's encountered the kingdom. He's encountered kingdom love. Being loved unconditionally, just because he exists, not because of what he can do for us or what he adds or brings to the pot, but because he's on the planet. We're loving him, and it's hard for him to catch it. This past Friday, a couple called me from northern Indiana, and they said, Pastor, we have 120 pounds of pork sausage. We were wondering if you wanted. I know, right? I laughed just like that. I said, really? You want to know if we want 120 pounds of pork sausage? I said, where do I go to get it? And they said, we're going to bring it to you. I said, really? And so he's sitting there listening. I'm on speaker, and he's listening to that. Yeah. And I hang up and I said to him, who does that? I said, nobody but God. Nobody but God. It's hard for him to come to grips with the fact that there are people who can love him and want to love him through his difficulties.
Yes.
Yeah.
The issue that always comes up in this regard is that people are really struck by the fact that we're so different from other people. And it's not different in the sense of we're trying to tell anybody what to do. Like I was explaining to some students on campus the other day. I was talking with them about different issues that they face and the struggles in defending the faith. And I said, but the bottom line is love. There is no attack against love. You
That's
cannot attack love.
Yeah.
You don't have to defend love. Love is what's going to win the day every single time. And people can't say anything bad about that, because what bad can you say about somebody loving you?
There's something to be said about redemption, too, that when you understand how you've been redeemed, then you begin to see redemption in another way. My experience in walking, you asked a question earlier about defining returning citizen. Well, when I was in parole, I operated first and foremost as this man in front of me is an image bearer of Christ. Indiana Department of Corrections sees him as XYZ number, and as an individual. And yes, there are things that needed to be managed and supervised, but first and foremost, this is a man who's made as an image bearer of Christ. He is an ambassador of Christ, whether he knew that or not. And so when you see people as God intends us to see other individuals, my approach then will follow. And that's where some of that love comes into place. And so people begin to open up. I had relationships with people, as I do now, that are stunning, because you wouldn't think that somebody would open up, or that there would be a depth of relationship that can actually happen in a dynamic like that. It's the same thing at the Nazareth Man House, where you begin to develop deep, lasting relationships with men that are unexplainable. Why? Because of the love of Christ. We talked a little bit about that anything that's happening to you here at the Nazareth Man House is not me, it is not pastor, it is Christ pursuing you and loving you unconditionally and sovereignly moving and orchestrating so that you can see him that way over time. And so we get a front row seat to to do that, to watch God work in that way.
My wife, who incidentally is an angel from heaven, told me before I came home. She would tell me, she says, I'm going to introduce you to a love you've not known before. She says, and I guarantee you that over time, you're going to forget your DOC number. You're going to forget all of the things that held you down and held you back. And we're going to create that kind of environment around you where the love of Christ is so powerful and so strong, working through me, is what she said to me. And she is an angel from heaven. Did I say that? Okay. That's going to be transformative. And so as we begin to put the Nazareth Man House in play, it has been important to have that kind of love manifest in the Nazareth Man House, where we are not concerned. It's a paradigm shift. So we don't have this guy categorized based on what his criminality has been. But we're just kind of looking at him because his name is what it is, and helping him to get past himself and get past his past and see the possibility of the real man who is inside of him that God wants to bring to the forefront.
Yeah, these are important ideas, things that really, for the most part, a lot of people don't really think about. So let's kind of summarize some of these big concerns and concepts that we're bringing forward to people, because, quite frankly, I don't think we think this way often enough. And that is that we see people for who they are, not what they do. Right? So let's kind of traverse that for a moment and begin to help people to understand that we ought to be seeing people as people rather than as performance or as action. Because in our culture, we have a tendency to value and evaluate people based on what they do, not on who they are.
Yeah. In Mark 5, there's a Nazareth man in Mark 5. He is living in a cemetery. He is cutting on himself, and screaming and hollering, and everybody in the community is frightened of him. He's got a few friends whom he's managed to chase completely away from him. They tried to tie him up and get him some help, and nothing is working for him. Jesus comes along and he sees the man, the real man, the man God made inside of that man in the struggle, and he is able to then call forth that man. Now there's some issues, the demonic possession, and there's some things that he's got to work through. But the fact of the matter is that the man who the people from the village see later on, who is sitting there in his right mind, cleaned up and making sense finally, that man was always there. He just needed the Christ to bring to free that man, to help him to remove the things that had him bound. And so can anything good come out of Nazareth? You betcha. You betcha. A lot of good can come out of the hard and difficult places.
The issues that we face, I think, about these concepts are so foreign to so many people. Let's end our program today by helping people to understand how they can help you. So because, they might not feel comfortable, maybe they don't have the same kind of giftings that you might have, the same experiences, the same empathy that you might have, what is it that they can do to help you?
Well, you can pray for us. If you're a praying person, we need lots of prayer. And so pray for us. And go to our website, www.foresightforgivers.org. That's F-O-R-E, don't forget the E. F-O-R-E-S-I-G-H-T, F-O-R-G-I-V-E-R-S.org. Foresight Forgivers. And you can learn a little bit more about us. If you want to make donations to us, there's a way that you can do that. And call us, talk to us. Come by, see us. Perhaps you have a gift that we can take advantage of, or some other way that you can help us. And of course, we can always use a few dollars. We're looking for that often.
I would say the short answer would be mentors, people who are simply willing to walk beside these men, all right, to invest in a man. And the quick story that I would share behind that is I was sitting in a men's Bible study one time, and in walked an IMPD officer. And he said, I am a part of a program called the Indianapolis Parole Accountability Team. It was a new model of parole that joined parole and the police department together so that there was a parole agent and a police officer who walked beside a man who was on parole. And the whole goal was two are better than one. Not from a supervisory perspective, but from a support perspective. And so what they were looking to do is to start a mentor program that was specifically targeting high-risk offenders, men who are coming out of prison who had committed a crime that fits a particular category that is designated as high risk and violent. And so here he was, this police officer who was a Christ follower, he's there, and he's looking to the Big C church, because there were men from all different churches sitting around that table saying, will you walk out your faith and become a mentor, walk beside one of these men? That's how I got introduced to the entire world of reentry. I said, I'll do that. Because walking beside a man, men's ministry is no different when a guy has a felony or not. It's just the same core issues. He may have some nuances that are specific to him as a returning citizen, but so we utilize team mentoring. Team mentoring meaning that there is a one-on-one mentor that works with an individual, a man in the Nazareth Man House. We use peer mentoring, so as men progress through the Nazareth Man House, you got somebody who's a little further down the road, a little further deeper into the program, has been walking their reentry back into the world out, who now walks beside that man, and then staff. So Pastor Martin, myself, Miss Carolyn, our social worker. So all of these individuals make up kind of like a diamond that you turn that facet, and you see mentoring from multiple levels that are happening with that individual man. And so what can people do? You can be the church and simply just walk in faith next to a man, and we'll walk through that with you and support you as you support this individual man. So,
All of that and pork sausage.
yeah.
We need it all. Right?
Yeah, all that and pork sausage.
All of the above. So at the end of the day, at the end of a broadcast like this, I always ask people to tell us if you had a couple of minutes just to give us an overview of what it is that you want everybody to walk away with from this broadcast. You got 60, 120 seconds. What do you want to say to everybody? Big picture.
Well, listen, men are broken, and men are responsible and accountable for their bad decisions with the choices that were before them, and they should be held accountable. Men go to prison, they do their time, and they come home. And so many of them, most of them, not only can change, but want to. They just need help. What we need to, the message that we need to get out to the Big C Church is that we're in the business. We're in that business of redemption. That's our ministry, reconciliation. We've been given that ministry. Men can make it. We've got to get past thinking that people just want to hand out, seeing the least of these from the most negative perspective, and recognizing that there's a lot of good in a lot of men. We just need to tap into that with the gospel, which still is a transformative message.
Yes.
And it will make the difference in the life of a guy if we can get it to him.
I would say if you're listening, or if you're listening and you know somebody who has been previously incarcerated, Nazareth Man House is a Christ-centered transition home that if you're under supervision or just now coming off of supervision, we are here to walk beside you, to be in the Christian community, to help hold you accountable to the road that you want to walk through and to what our Lord has called us to. And if you're interested in that, then reach out, because there is an opportunity for you to walk out this road of redemption. It doesn't have to be what society tends to deem it to be. And so there is a way, and that way is through him. And praise the Lord for that.
Well, we've been grateful to come to you again here this week. Warp and Woof Radio, Radio Next.TV at the Cool Groove site, talking about returning citizens, the Nazareth Man House on the south side of Indianapolis. Tell us your address again.
I'll tell you our phone number.
Yeah, tell
our
your
phone number is
sorry about that.
317-222-5486. And do call us. Call us, and we'll be in touch with you.
Yeah.
Hide it out on the south side.
I'm going to hear about this later on. He's lighting up behind the camera over there. Thanks so much for joining us here again this week. We're grateful to be here with you. Thank you again for joining us on Wednesdays. We'll have another great guest next week. Thanks for the opportunity to be with you in your earbuds or on your podcast, wherever you might get them. Ours comes out of iTunes. And for those of you joining us today on Facebook Live, thanks ever so much for your presence. We'll be back again next week.